Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Vampire Academy, Episode 1. It is simply called The Pilot. This was a show that ranked high on the Patreon voting tier over at patreon.com/malefuzztv. Sometimes my patrons have a sense of humor and want to see me be miserable, even though they're making me review a show that I'm not going to have any constructive opinions on, really. I'm going to sit here and tell you why this does not work for me. I don't think it's very good. Maybe its target audience will see something in it, but it is a very trashy, kind of teen-focused show. Although there is a lot of F-bombs in it, so I guess they're going for younger adults, we'll say. Well, I mean, young adults, the term for a reason, I suppose. But so Vampire Academy is based on books, I think. And it is, yes, I've just confirmed it. It's based on a book series, and it's set at, you would guess, a vampire academy, but I would bizarrely say that it's more about the royal line. We get introduced in this episode to 3 vampire factions or kinds of vampire, 2 of which are closely together. One is the rich royal line who are in charge of everything, and the second is the bodyguard line who are there to protect all the rich vampires. So it's very much a class system kind of analogy. You've got a lot of those things going on. There's a lot of character, like friendships and romances that are sort of forbidden between the two that are kind of happening. I'll get into that. And then the third class is the evil monster vampires who want to kill everyone else. And, you know, not just the humans, they want to kill the other vampires. The best way I could describe this is that it's a trashy teen vampire show mixed with Bridgerton, kind of. And I say that having only watched one episode of Bridgerton, which was also something I was forced to watch by people. And the reason why I say that is because there's a queen vampire, and a lot of this is about who's going to ascend to the throne. There's a lot of talk about who's proper for each other and things like that. There's like multiple fancy galas in this episode where they get together and have, you know, ceremonies and things like that. I was getting a lot of that Bridgerton kind of vibe. A lot of popular music. Now, this is not set in the past. That's the funny thing about this is actually set seemingly present day. There's a couple of computers at various points and whatnot, but they still feel like they're dressing up for old-fashioned style occasions and things like that. Obviously, I hated it. I thought this was torture to get through. It was painful on numerous levels. Mainly, just the general kind of shallow quality to it, which was there's a lot of play pop song or something similar and have a montage of them being happy and dancing or talking about the affairs that one brother's having with other women when he's supposed to be ascending to the throne with his fiancée and other bollocks like that. And that's only in the first few minutes before there's kind of like a swerve that happens right before the opening title, which sets up the rest of the story. Our main characters, we have Lissa, who is part of the royal family line, and she isn't really interested in ascending or politicking. Her brother's going to be the one that's named the new king by the queen, and she's quite happy with that. She's best friends with Rose, who is actually one of the bodyguard guilds, and it's kind of improper how close she is to her, but because she's high up, they kind of let her away with having her along. Like, for instance, in the opening, she's actually going to the party with her as her guest, when she's really, Rose is supposed to be one of the guards that are outside guarding all of the perimeter and all that kind of stuff. And we see like a nasty vampire attack and a couple of the guards take them down. That's apparently happens every day. There's always evil vampires once night falls. Because all these other vampires, the rich vampires and the bodyguard vampires, they seem to be able to go out in the daytime just fine. Maybe it's a little harsh on their skin. They use an umbrella occasionally. But the monstrous vampires that want to kill them, they seem to only come out in nighttime. So they think it's dangerous to be outside the grounds at night, is one of the things they set up. Which, okay, sure. But the big thing that happens at the start of the episode, and this is just setting up the story of the show, is that her brother, Alyssa's brother Andre, is killed in a car accident, which did make me question exactly how vampires die in this universe, but I'm not going to dwell on it too much because ultimately I don't really care that much. But because of this, all of a sudden the queen wants to name Lissa the successor, and for political reasons, it's what they want to do, because if their family isn't the one on the throne, then the voting will be out of whack, and the conservative vampire clans will all take control, and things will get worse, and whatever, right? So the episode is pretty much her dealing and getting over her brother's death, and constantly saying she doesn't want to be queen. She doesn't want to go down this path. She wants to spend her time with her best friend Rose. They want to go off together elsewhere in the world. And if she does become a queen, she wants Rose to be her personal bodyguard because she's her best friend. But everyone around them, the queen, J. August Richards, who of course was Charles Gunn, on Angel, the spin-off of the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Two good vampire shows I mentioned there, as opposed to this one. He's the father of like some other characters that are around, some other sort of teenage or college age characters that we meet. One of whom is going to be the queen if Andrea became king, but Andrea's dead now, so she's just kind of sulking and miserable that she's not going to get to become important anymore. But he also is kind of like an advisor. He's quite high ranking, and he's like constantly saying, "Oh, you two can't be together anymore. Rose is." She can't be your friend like this, and you have to become queen because it's important for everything. So he's got this kind of authority. He's an authority figure, is what I'm trying to say. Honestly, the thing that strikes me weird about this show though is, at least in the first episode, how much of it, the vampire stuff, doesn't really feel like it's that important, other than a couple of scenes where they're at the party and they're like feeding on a human, right? Who seems to be a willing human, right? These vampires aren't necessarily going to kill everyone. They're okay just to feed, and there's some humans that are probably into that because they're kinky or whatever. So there's a couple of sexy biting scenes, but honestly, like, them being vampires doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal or that important to what the show's really about so far. Arguably, yeah, the evil vampires who are the threat that come after dark, that they have to like protect themselves from, sure, they have to be monsters and they have to be coming after everyone. All the main characters though, being vampires, almost feels like irrelevant to a point. They have their own kind of religion, and at one point Lissa has to learn an oath or something in their ancient language that she has to say at a ceremony. But I mean, that could literally be anything. That could be any made up culture that they're putting these characters in. The fact that they're vampires from episode 1 just feels like something that's tacked on. You kind of forget that they are vampires for large portions of the episode, because they're just outside talking in the sunlight. They're arguing over who's doing better in bodyguard class, or they're talking about getting over the death of a loved one. Like, very little of it feels that relevant to being vampires, except the evil ones who come and attack them after dark. And obviously, because they're the ones that are actually trying to kill people, they feel the most vampire-y, I suppose, if you want to say that. But yeah, so that was kind of weird. Maybe obviously it's more important as the story goes on and there's more vampire specific things for these characters, but it really just feels like it's a show about the rich elite and the people that look after them, their bodyguards and security, who are kind of their own race or own culture, right? That's basically what the show is. And from this first episode, like, obviously I didn't get anything out of it. I didn't really care about any of the characters. There's love interests kind of introduced for both the main girls that are kind of teased, and one of them is very typical in that Lissa's new love interest that's introduced halfway through the first episode is this guy whose parents actually were part of the royal line but actually defected to the monstrous side. And forgive me for not remembering what all these factions are called, because they all have their own wonky names. There's kind of an awkward introduction at the start of the episode explaining it all with voiceover. But they defected, and because of that, he's still around, but everyone kind of looks at him like he's a leper. Like, they treat him like he's scum because his parents went evil. But he ends up helping Lissa with learning some of this speech that she has to make in this ancient language, and as a result, they start hanging out, they start seeing each other more, and no one who sees this is happy about it. J. August Richards is like, no, he's a non-starter, you can't be with him. His parents committed a mortal sin, so he's a no-no. But if by the end of the episode, though, Lissa reaches out to him by sending him a message. So you've got the forbidden romance angle there. It's very much playing with a lot of these same tropes. And likewise, there's kind of a new bodyguard that's introduced that Rose kind of butts heads with a little bit, but it feels like they're probably going to be a romantic interest for each other down the line as well. He has a very... He was probably the worst actor in the episode, actually, as this new bodyguard guy. What was his name? Dimitri. He, I thought, was really trying very hard to be kind of tough and sexy and cool and, like, hard-headed and stuff like that. It was a little bit painfully sit through. I wouldn't say all the actors are bad. Like, the acting varies kind of wildly, and obviously the good actors that might be in here are hampered by the material, which is very trashy and just kind of generic and by the numbers. Right down to the way it's edited and the way it's shot, you get this feeling of, a quick cut as the camera pans over the castle. That's not a castle, it's more of a mansion. But it's going over the mansion, and there's like all these bright color lights hitting it, and there's like sort of a pop beat playing in the background as we cut to the characters drinking and laughing, and it's all very happy. And it's a sort of like, I'm recognizing this. Hell, I'm even recognizing little bits of 50 Shades of Grey in terms of the style of how it's shot in here, which tells you exactly kind of the audience that it's aiming for. And there is a question to be said about target audience and is something supposed to appeal to me. But I will maintain that it is possible to have a specific target audience but be good enough in quality to actually work for almost anyone. There's certain genres that I don't like, but there'll be the odd example where no, it's just that good, it doesn't matter that it's not necessarily targeted at me or whatever. And I obviously like other vampire things. I mentioned Buffy and Angel earlier. Obviously, I grew up loving that. I like horror stories. I like lots of things that potentially this is kind of tapping into slightly. But it chooses its focus in a very specific way. It's the way the story is told that makes it a trashy young adult style story. There's nothing inherently about having young characters of this age having romantic plots that means it has to be bad or means it has to be trashy. But when you talk about these young adult series and we talk about having that type of quality, what we're really talking about is how shallow and hollow a lot of it is, how you're expected to care just because people are attractive, just because they're staring at each other and because there's some sappy music playing, as opposed to the writing actually earning you caring about the characters or caring about why they're appealing to each other or anything like that. It's all very just by the numbers. I would say the actual plot of this. As far as, there's, if anything, the other thing it made me think of a little bit was more like a Harry Potter than anything else. Just because a lot of the vampires have got like flame powers and they can control fire, so there was a lot of what just felt like magic tricks happening around, which was giving me those kind of vibes. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it very much feels like this show was greenlit by Peacock because they want to tap into a lot of popular things that have been popular in the last, decade or so. There's been other popular vampire shows aimed at teens, Vampire Diaries, in the CW, stuff like that. It feels like there's a little bit of Harry Potter in there, and arguably Harry Potter, even though obviously it was this huge thing and is arguably better in its quality because it's this big Warner Brothers tentpole movie franchise. Ultimately, that led to a lot of other book adaptations. That led to Hunger Games. It led to Twilight. It led to, going further down the food chain, you get to Divergent. And then you get to things like Mortal Instruments, which got a movie and then a TV show. And the further you go down this list, it feels like this is just kind of down there in the dumps with the rest of them, which is, it's taking this relatively popular book, I assume. I don't know. I'd never heard of it before this. And it's turning it into a TV show, I suspect with a reasonable, under control budget to try and be a success, because Peacock needed something that appealed to this demographic. They wanted something there, And honestly, there's not a whole lot in here for anyone else. Maybe fans of the book are into it, or maybe they're not. Maybe there's like little changes and that's pissed them off. I really have no idea. As far as anything else goes in the show, like, because obviously I've not really given a spoiler warning because I've not really talked about anything that would be considered a spoiler. You know, everything I said was the setup, and then talking about the new characters that are introduced. And that's basically, like a lot of pilots, is the episode. It's mostly just that. I would argue there's not much of a hook at the end, other than just Lizzie, or Liza, is willing to reach out to her love interest, Christian. In fact, Christian Grey. Oh god, the names are all starting to blur together. Oh no. Other than that, it very much is just, you know, it's trying to be stylish, it's trying to be slick. The way it ends, where the camera kind of just pans out into this, like, basically out of the window, it transitions into like an aerial shot, probably a drone shot of the campus that they're on, and the credits just start coming up as we see that, as the shot continues, which did look very slick, and it feels like it wants to be cool and it wants to be sexy and all these things. But there's not a single iota of grit, and I'm not saying that it should be gritty, but everything feels too, network TV. Everything's too clean. Everything feels too made up and presented to be this perfect world, if that makes sense. It doesn't feel lived in. It doesn't feel like there's any. I guess the way to put it is, like, if you look at Star Wars, you have the Star Wars originals, which everything feels like this gritty, lived-in world. And it's not the story itself is gritty, far from it, but the world feels like a real world because everything feels used and lived in. And then you have the prequels where everything's far too clean and shiny, and it feels kind of fake and off. You kind of get that from this a little bit as well, which is partly why I don't like period pieces. And this isn't a period piece, but it kind of works like one. It feels like one. Everything's too pretty and nice and regal and all the rest of it. And all I could think was, surely it was dirtier back then. Everything, like people, everything was shitter. You didn't have vacuum cleaners yet. What? How in the hell? No Hoover. How is everything looking this spick and span? You know, and that's not really a big problem, but there's just this disconnect I have with these things where everything feels just too pristine and perfect, and it feels like someone's fantasy rather than any kind of attempt at a believable world. And that's maybe just a taste thing more than anything else, but I felt that when I was watching this. Everything just felt a little too clean and shiny and lacking character. And would you believe it, I don't really give a shit about the plot lines of who's going to ascend to the royal throne, especially since, I mean, to actually, like, so a lot of what I've said so far is talking about the style and critiquing what's not to my taste. To make what I think is a pretty objective critique here of this, that I think is just poor writing, is that J. August Richards tells Liza that she has to go and accept that she's going to be a part of this system and go to the throne, because if not, then there won't be enough votes on their side to maintain the progress that's been made by the Queen. The progress you assume, if you compare it to the real world, you assume progressive attitudes, changing of old rules, whereas the conservative vampires want to take control, and they will if Lissa doesn't take this responsibility. That's all fine and well, but there's like nothing in the episode to show us this. Not only do we not get a sense of like what sort of things will be taken away, or what vampire rights will be stripped if Lissa doesn't like fight to keep them and take that responsibility on. We don't even get a sense of who these conservative vampires are. I don't even think we get introduced to any characters who are hoping for the demise of this current regime and want to like overthrow. Maybe there's a couple of glances at the party, but there's not really any characters that are introduced where we get, oh, they've got an agenda, they want to like make things stricter and go back to older ways, and, you know, do things like not let a character like Rose be friends with someone higher up. Obviously the story here is going to ultimately be about breaking down these barriers and this class system that is in place, and that's all fine and well, but there's not really much evidence in this episode to back up what J. August Richards actually says is going to happen, which is kind of weird. Like, give us a sense of, if you're going to give us like a political story where you're fighting to keep things moving forward, then you have to kind of give us a sense of the other side, or whoever is like the antagonists are, and it's the sense of trying to stop the progress, who's trying to turn back the clock, as it were, politically. You know, you have to give us someone, you have to give us a sense of this. So by the end of the episode, the result of this is that you don't necessarily feel invested in her having to make that choice, because we've not actually seen any evidence that she should. You know, a good bit of storytelling would be that we understand that this is something she doesn't want, and it's getting in the way of her own plans for her life and whatever she wants to do with her friends and so on and so on. But if we saw something that made us go, oh no, but it's important that she does this because someone has to, that would add an internal conflict to us as the audience. It would make it more engaging, because we would be like, we sympathize with her, assuming we got enough to like her. I'm not sure the episode does that, but let's just assume that it did. If we then saw, like, no, but she has to do this, even though she doesn't want to, and we feel bad for thinking that, but ultimately, this has to be done. She has to make this sacrifice and be kind of a, you know, a hero, maybe not the right word, but she has to make sacrifices because we see the result, or what could happen if she doesn't. But because we don't see that, we don't even feel the question. We don't even feel the weight of it surrounding her. It's just a line of dialogue that someone said to her. So I do think the first episode is quite poor in terms of writing, even removing everything I don't like about the style of this type of show, removing everything I don't like about anything else. I do think objectively it is poorly written and actually setting up the conflict for the main character. So hopefully, I mean, if you made it through all my ranting about all the things I hate about this type of show and you got to that point, then I hope you found that insightful. But I think I'm done. I don't think I've got anything left to say about Vampire Academy. It's a hollow show that is riding on the coattails of several other TV shows and movies and book series that it wants to just try and be successful in that sphere. I don't know if it's going to find an audience that are going to care about it. I don't know if it's just too obscure because it's on Peacock and it's not going to find that following that it wants. But hey ho. That is the Vampire Academy pilot. Let me know what you thought of the episode if you happen to watch it in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. Get me on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But that is me. I'll see you next time. Have you got any vanilla?